Hi, and welcome to week 4 of English 123. This week we are going to look at the second part of your problem solution essay, and this topic is titled Proposing a Solution. So our objectives for this week, first of all, we want to make sure that we're good with last week's assignment, which was the part 1, speculating about a cause. If there's anything that I can do to help you be clear on that paper, please don't hesitate to contact me. That was the first week, the first part of this 2-part series, your problem solution. You talked about the problem, the causes of the problem, and then this week you're going to move on in the same topic to the solution for your problem. In looking ahead in the next 2 weeks, weeks 5 and 6, that's going to be the second part of this class. That's where we start the second 4-week session. That next part is going to be entirely devoted to beginning the steps of your research paper. So next week we will then focus on our annotated bibliography and thinking about a topic related to our big research paper. For your overview of this week, the assignments that will be due, you have several small assignments. You have your paragraphing blog, which is 25 points. This is an assignment here you can see down below. It says select a paragraph from your essay 1. That's your argumentative paper, the first one that we did during week 2. You're going to pick one paragraph from that paper and revise it for unity, coherence, and development. And then you're going to post 3 things. You're going to post the old version of that paragraph, your new revised version of the paragraph, and then a few sentences of an explanation of what you did to improve that paragraph. When making your revisions for unity, coherence, and development, I have included the definitions of what each of those things means here for you. So take a look at that. Unity means, is your paragraph focused on one specific point? Okay, it's all unified, staying on topic. You have a topic sentence, and all of your supporting sentences relate to that topic sentence. Coherence means how easily and smoothly does your paragraph flow? It doesn't jump around, doesn't have choppy sentences. Do you have transition words? Are you repeating key ideas and phrases? And then development is how well you have developed your idea. Okay, you have a couple of reading assignments to do this week. You have your pre-writing journal that you've been working on from last week in your problem solution paper, and you don't have a whole lot more to do to it. All you need to do is add in your draft, your final draft, and then submit. And this is the 2-part series, and it'll be due by this Sunday. You have your final draft due by Sunday of both parts 1 and 2 of your essay. So you're basically resubmitting part 1 and adding on part 2. And then you do have a 10-point midway reflection journal. This is just a small little reflection writing about how are you doing so far in this class. So here's your journal prompt again, and you have been submitting. Last week you've submitted all of these bullets for part 1. Okay, you've brainstormed your topic, you talked about the problem, the causes of it, you've done your research, you put a thesis statement together, you wrote an outline. So this week you're going to focus on part 2. Part 2 is where you're going to develop your solution. Reference the St. Martin's Guide on these pages so you can see how to do that. You want to come up with an outline for your solution, and then once you write your draft, you want to submit it to Smart Thinking probably no later than Friday in order to get your feedback in time on Sunday, make your final revisions, and post it as your final assignment that's due by Sunday. Okay, so as long as you add in these final posts, you're done, and that's your 30 points. So here's the prompt for part 2 of our essay, Proposing a Solution. This is the 2-part essay where you're going to research the causes of the problem and then propose a solution that will address the major cause or causes of your problem. For this submission, please pay particular attention because sometimes this can confuse people. You're going to add a second section to last week's essay, creating a 6 to 7 page paper. Okay, keep in mind, you already have the first 3 pages written of this 6 to 7 page paper. So all you're doing is writing another 3 page paper and just adding it on to last week's paper. In this portion, you're going to focus on proposing the solution to last week's problem that you presented. Your solution is going to demonstrate that your solution will solve the problem. Okay, that's your focus for this week. You also need to do a couple of things in this paper. You need to anticipate at least one other possible solution, but then explain why your solution would be better. You're not writing a summary of multiple possible solutions. This is still an argumentative essay where you're going to argue the aspect that your solution you're proposing is best. Okay, so when you do your counter arguments, what you're doing is you're saying, well, yes, this possible idea could work and this possible idea could work, but yet my solution is still the best one. Okay, so try not to limit your thinking. You might find it helpful to hold off on identifying the solution. Okay, perhaps you want to spend time listing other possibilities, make a chart, pros and cons of each solution, which ones have been tried, did they work, did they not work, are they practical, were there other side effects from these possible solutions. In doing that, you might be able to figure out which one's better than the other, and this might help you in building a case to defend your solution. Now, your solution may not be perfect, but it should arguably be the best one out there. Okay, it can't be something that's already been tried and true and already happened and solved the problem. That won't work. So the basic requirements, again, we stick with the format that you've been using. It's a 6 to 7 page paper. It has to have at least 6 sources total. That means 3 this week because you probably already have your 3 from last week. Include a full works cited page. Don't forget, when your works cited page gets longer, you need to list your sources in alphabetical order by the author's last name. If you don't have an author, then it reverts to the title. And then in this case, if you are interested in including alternate sourcing, that's definitely an option. Okay, perhaps there's an interview that you want to do. You might have some locally printed sources, brochures, websites, something like that, that's not necessarily a book or a research-based source. And so you're encouraged to include those things as well. Please remember to submit your paper to Smart Thinking at least 2 to 3 days before it's due. You're welcome to submit to Smart Thinking more than once. It's always an option. Keep in mind that the feedback that you get is one person's perspective. You can take it or leave it. Perhaps you disagree with what they say, and that's okay. It's just another set of eyes and a perspective looking at your paper. So feel free once you get it back to see what they wrote, and perhaps you want to make any modifications or changes before you submit your final draft. Here's where you're going to submit your full essay, and I would ask that you please take a look at the feedback that you get from Part 1 essay when I return it to you after I've graded it. If I've made any suggestions of changes, corrections, or whatnot, I would ask that you incorporate those changes in your revisions for this full part of the paper when you resubmit. Okay, I would prefer not to see the same errors resubmitted again if I've gone through the time to point them out for you to fix. Here's where you're going to write your midway reflection journal. You're just checking in on how you've been doing so far. How is this class meeting your goals? How am I serving you? And what can I do to better serve you? So please do that for a real easy 10 points. This part here, this is a midway course evaluation. This is optional. There's not a grade attached to this, and this is directly for Blackboard to give CBU feedback on how the class is going so far. And then this is an optional video to look at. Professor Bartels has put in some videos for just future reference on the Community Discourse Project. That is something that's due in week 8. So if you're not feeling overwhelmed at this point, feel free to watch these videos and see what's coming up later on in the class. All right, so we're going to talk about proposing a solution. This is the focus on this part of your essay. You've addressed your problem and you've suggested the possible causes of the problem. Okay, now you need to offer a solution. So you're going to carefully combine last week's essay into this week's essay to include one big paper. If you were careful in how you wrote your conclusion of last week's paper, in ending your paper with, in fact, that your situation does need a solution and just leaving it at that, that will smoothly work into becoming this week's introduction. So, you need a well-defined problem. Is your problem focused? Hopefully you did that already in last week's paper. And is it a solvable problem? Okay, if we don't have a problem that can be solved, this could be a little bit tricky for this paper. So, make sure that the solution is the focus on this week's paper. Don't revert back to discussing the problem. Okay, that cannot dominate your essay. You already presented the problem last week. We are moving on to focusing on the solution. Make sure that your solution is feasible, okay, and make sure that your ideas are not just pie in the sky, not possible in reality. Okay, they can be creative and they can be innovative, but they should be somewhat plausible. Also consider, have you proposed solutions that have already tried and failed? Because if that's the case, then you need to focus on that and figure out what you would do differently. In your counter arguments, remember to consider what the opposing viewpoints would say about your solution. Okay, if they're going to find holes in your solution, let's anticipate that and figure out what they're going to say and how you're going to address that. Okay, and also keep in mind for your counter arguments, when you mention the other possible solutions that aren't as good as your main solution, those could be your counter arguments and say, well, some people have tried this or might want to try this or that, but this is why that won't work and my solution is better. If you want to focus on an example, take a look at your St. Martin's Guide. You have a short reading called More Testing, More Learning, and try to do an analysis in this format to break down that reading. Okay, what is the thesis statement that the author gives? What's the problem? And how do they propose a solution? Okay, what's the reasoning to support their solution? Do they offer counter arguments? And what's the main solution offered? So take a look at that. It might help you to just look at someone's reasoning and before you write your own paper. Here's our rubric attached for this assignment. Okay, this is a 100-point paper. 20% goes to your well-defined problem in just presenting, okay, that this needs a solution. 10% is just proposing the solution that's possible and innovative and can clearly address your problem. But the 40% is in how well you support that. Okay, so these kind of go together in a lump sum. How well do you support your solutions? 10% of your grade goes to, do you insightfully address the counter arguments? Okay, do you address them, object to them, and use it in order to make your argument more solid? 10% is your plan. How well you organize your essay. Do you have transition statements that help the reader, guide the reader to where you're going with your paper? For example, do you start your paragraphs with the transition word, like furthermore, or for example, or first of all? Those are just good cues in reading and writing to help the reader know what the writer is saying and where they're going. And the last 10% is your MLA, your grammar, your overall format. Okay, this is going to be a 5 to 7 pages roughly, and then including your works cited page. Tips for success, as always, proofread all of your work. Do it in little steps and increments throughout the course so you're not cramming all of this on Sunday. Reference your textbooks. There's lots of resources available, especially when you get tripped up with citing your sources in your essay. Did you include your works cited page at the end in alphabetical order? And did you ask me when you had help? So I hope you have a good week, and please, I look forward to hearing from you.